So, hello everyone. I'm so glad to be here this evening to discuss this really, what seems to be a very important topic, considering that as soon as the info went out about depression, there were so many questions that I got, which I'm hoping we can get answered. My guest today is Dr. Jhuma Basak. I'm not going to read her entire CV because that's going to take forever. So I'm just going to give you a brief about Dr. Juma, who's a psychoanalyst. She's a psychoanalyst of the Indian Psychoanalytical Society with a PhD in psychology from Kyushu University in Japan. She started her career as a dancer choreographer, which is so interesting. And I didn't know that, Juma, and then later moved into psychoanalysis. As a dancer, she's traveled widely across the world, supported by the Indian Council of Cultural Relations during her artistic tenure with the Dancers Guild for over a decade. Her area of interest in psychoanalysis lies in culture, women, and gender, and she has international publications in journals and books translated into different languages like Japanese, Italian, French, German, Spanish, Hungarian, along with papers presented at various international IPA congresses over the last 20 years, like in Nice, Chicago, New Orleans, Boston, and London. She has her own private clinical practice in Calcutta and is associated with Crystal Minds in Calcutta. And she's the founder and chairperson of Mira Center for Innovation. Welcome, Juma. I'm so glad you could make it. We've been
Thank
planning
you,
this
Sheila.
for ages. So this subject of depression, like I said, as soon as I, sent out the info that, in fact, the people have been asking for it to start with, and as soon as I sent out the information saying that it's going to be depression, there were just so many questions. Some of them not really related to depression per se, but what it kind of implies to me is that mental health is such an important issue that may be not being addressed as much as it should be. Would you agree to that mental health is not as not
I,
featuring
th-
as
I, f-
prominently?
I think the COVID situation has brought about the present climate where um, a certain awareness is kind of being enforced on us. And I think that is favorable towards mental health awareness,
Mhm.
though not, desirable that a situation like this should happen to bring this about. But it's like on our face. It's very difficult to evade from this. Everybody is having to deal with it at various levels.
Yeah. So when you talk about depression, how do you differentiate clinical depression from just a low mood, or feeling blue, feeling down? What is the clinical differentiation?
um, I think firstly I would like to clarify is that if we go by symptoms A, B, and C, I think it will be doing a great injustice to the discipline itself
Hmm.
and to all the great practitioners of the world who spend years to learn how to distinguish with such a clinical, you know, uh, let's
Yeah.
say, development of depression. But in a generic manner, if I can say, is that this state of low, when it is over a period of a long stretch of time and it is seeming to be into a pattern, it takes time to be able to identify that. And it becomes like almost a part and parcel of myself. If in very in tentative terms, if one says like 100% out of 100%, if one is feeling like really not wanting to connect with anyone, not feeling happy, dissatisfied, so I would say there is an of 70% of the time or 60%, I would say that there is an emotional turmoil. To be able to see that whether this emotional turmoil is a depression or anxiety, or could be other layers, finer layers of feeling small, that needs to be consulted with the clinician. But it needs a pattern where
Yeah.
I'm being able to see that all the life driven forces that I like, that I love, enjoy. Let's say I love dance, I love music, I love eating biryani. But none of that is giving me that sparkle of life for a
Pleasure.
consecutive period of time. Then I'm sure all of us are fairly, sensitive, intelligent to be able to understand something is not in place. And that's where I would say it's not important to stamp it as clinical depression, according to my understanding, but perhaps to reach out to a professional.
For help. Yeah. And
Yeah.
there is help. There is
Absolutely,
help.
absolutely. It's growing,
Yeah.
and I'm hoping that it grows even more because this pandemic situation has also made us realize that, according to the demand of the situation, our country unfortunately does not have enough resources to provide that. So there is a huge area of work that awaits for us, especially when we are talking about, uh, the township areas, the villages, the rural sector.
So has telemedicine increased that reach? I'm I
Um, I think, though I'm not technically the person to talk about medicine, because as you know, um,
yeah,
this is the hierarchy of it that the
yeah,
medical person should talk about it. But my colleagues who are psychiatrists, I hear that there are certain norms even with telemedication.
yeah,
Um, so they have to go by those telemedication, but people have strongly reached out for telemedication,
yeah,
for virtual therapy.
yeah.
And in the last couple of months, it has been just growing, and from outskirts. And I think that is a very important part, that some younger people that I know that who've reached out to me from the outskirts, they may have found it difficult to come to the city, that kind of travel and negotiating time. But
Yeah.
this is convenient for them to at least have access.
So you do address it on online virtually also,
At
Jhuma,
this
your
point,
counts.
yes.
Yes.
At
Okay.
this point, yes.
Yeah.
Not maybe the most desirable and comfortable medium that I would like to choose, but I think at this point, this is what is working favorably for all of us to negotiate with.
Yeah, yeah, and especially for people outside of in the rural areas where they may not have access to a
Even
therapist.
certain cities. I had once upon a time somebody from Tripura, and to find therapists over there, I'm hoping it may have changed now in the last couple of years, but it was a challenge. So I think even with certain, maybe a smaller range of cities, not really metropolitan cities, they are also reaching out.
Reaching out. And how receptive are people now to psychotherapy, Juma? Are people more open to coming to a therapist? Is it not so much of a stigma anymore? It was, right?
Comparatively, yes, Sheila, you do know that comparatively there's been a significant shift, but still, I think the attitude needs to change. This is still
Yeah,
hush hush. This is still something is quote unquote wrong.
wrong with you.
Yeah,
Yeah,
wrong. And quote unquote, we are embarrassed and shy.
yeah,
This is not about something, I have a heart problem, or I have acute arthritis and I need to go, and we can talk
yeah.
about it in a very healthy dialogue. This is still very, private, over private, and to be ashamed of. But I think we are negotiating with that.
With that, yeah. So, coming to depression per se, how common is it? And is it going up in terms of, and especially in terms of gender? Do you see a difference between men and women?
Uh, I
The two,
think
yeah,
once again, I may not be able to give a very clear, statement that with women it's larger, because I will have to once again look at younger women and older women.
mm,
So there's a lot of younger women where their anxiety level is higher, whereas with older women we find that maybe depression level is higher.
mm,
So I think we need to do studies on that. And of course, when we break up further into urban, rural, and all of those aspects
mm.
there, that will give us more the demography would give us more specific details of that, but definitely um, uh, mental health issues, that which has reached the clinic, has been from the women's end. And there are, even when you and I were talking just a while back, there are various reasons why perhaps women are challenged with so much of emotional aspects, because of many changes that they have to undergo, many challenges of their growing up. For example, they have, in their entire trajectory of life, they have a huge level of physiological challenges, which I think you would be a very good
Yeah.
person to talk about, and what it does to our,
Yeah.
hormone level, and how it affects our physiology, our eating habits, our mental state, emotional state, all of that. Other than
Yeah.
that, growing up in most Indian families with such challenges of being, of being treated as a lesser mortal comparatively, because you're a woman and you're having to constantly fight that.
Yeah.
So there is an atmosphere where you are having to be in a conflictual situation from your growing up period, and then you're having to prove that you are better, and that kind of pressure on you. So in a
Yeah.
way, there is a lot of, I would say, emotional enrichment because of so much of challenge.
Change.
But yes, change and challenge, all of that. But at the same time, it becomes a heavy burden because it's just piled on them. And then there is the socio-cultural change of marrying, going to another family in most Indian family structures. And there's another range of that change coming there, adjusting to that kind, the new family situation, taking care of the entire household. Even for working women, yeah, I mean, I would say the other parameter for working women who are also homemakers would be to prove that, I'm like almost equivalent to God. I'm good in this as well as that.
Yeah.
And
Superwoman. Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
what are we doing to the
Yeah.
woman? We're
And
just,
it,
yeah, sorry.
yeah, and her work at home probably doesn't ease. She still has to manage home, and it's a double duty, working at presenting herself and leaving herself open to the world when she starts to work. So I think everything put together, definitely, most certainly, it would be very challenging for any woman, and a woman from some sort of a background where she is consciously being told that she's a lesser human.
Right.
Said, it's that much more
I mean, it is
difficult.
so engraved in our
Yeah,
families, in our society. I mean,
yeah,
we all know that the professional woman has to fight in a male world.
yeah,
And then there is the patriarchal expectation and the ambience in the family situation. So, uh,
yeah,
constant negotiation of this. So, what happens to her nerves and her emotional state?
yeah,
So,
yeah,
we see the vulnerability, the fragility
yeah,
more often,
yeah,
but the enrichment is also equally there. The empowerment is equally there, but it
yeah.
just kind of gets so much on them.
Yeah, yeah. That's wonderful to hear. But the very I think pertinent question to ask, Juma, is, there's a common myth that if you are depressed, you're a bit of a loser, and
Right.
that depression means that you can't cope and you can't hack it. So is it just people who are quote unquote losers who get depressed, or are there successful people who also suffer from depression?
Yeah. I think that's wonderful, Sheila, you brought about, is that losing and having nothing has nothing to do with whether I'm going to be happy or depressed. I think we can have everything that we want in life and desire, and still be very, very unhappy, lonely, and not wanting um, the life that I have. So it is. I think it is unfair to think that people who are losers are depressed, or depression is equivalent to losers. Besides, I think but society and families need to redefine whom are we calling achievers and losers? This
Yeah,
needs redefinition. This is
absolutely.
not a permanent stamp, and it is relative from individual to individual. And I think today, when we are having, bringing up children in our community, in our families, I think it is important to be able to give them the opportunity to redefine what success means to them.
Success,
And
absolutely.
and
Absolutely.
there is going to be no life without innumerable failures and innumerable moments of success. It's
Yeah.
not going to be static and forever.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I love that answer. You know, there's so many questions from the viewers, Juma. I'm going to just reach out, read out some of them. Um, of late, so one of the viewers says, of late, I've seen marriages break up. At the time a couple are done with the kids and family responsibilities. I wonder whether it's because women during menopause are misunderstood and get depressive. Shouldn't people regularly check themselves out to ensure that all their readings are normal? Would this help with depression and suicide, that I feel is only a step away? When that depressed people are pushed to take.
Okay, I'm not very clear on that,
Yeah,
but
I think she means that if once we reach menopause, would
Mhm.
there be a test to define or to identify depression? Number one, and since around menopause they tend to get depressed, which is true. You do tend to get depressed around menopause because of your hormonal changes, but there is really no test to identify depression, is there?
um, I think it will be.
I
Once
mean,
again, a fragmented way of looking at, if we want to stamp that, if we do a test now, it's because of the menopausal change that the person is depressed. It's a life cycle, let's say, developmental, emotional developmental state. And I think we need to accept that. When, let's say, a life cycle change would also be when the man is experiencing, I don't know, I would say retirement. So physiological aspect of it.
yeah,
These are life cycle changes that can determine a certain state of mind. And if we are going to have a test only for that period, I think
yeah.
it will be a certain fragmentation of it. Yes, um, if even if it is, let's say there is, as you say, that there is an element of depression in menopausal situations and
Yeah,
post-menopause that we see, I would say that the idea is to be able to negotiate with that.
yeah,
Even let's say when one is going through a hormonal outburst in the youth,
yeah,
and it is going out of hands altogether, whether in terms of I'm looking at uh, my masturbatory habits, or whether I'm looking at how quote unquote manic I am behaving. I think this needs to be dealt with in a much more holistic manner, and to be not pathologized and stamped. These are life cycle aspects that we need to negotiate with.
So when would you say, like, let's say a woman is going through menopause and she does have all these symptoms. Um, Ideally, she should be seeing a therapist. If she can't, if she's not able to negotiate it within her own family, she doesn't have good, close, authentic relationships that
Right.
should ideally, help her through this.
Sure.
Would you say that it would be better to see a therapist at this point?
Sure, sure. A lot of the times, even when we have family support and a lot of it, there are many things that we can't talk
You know,
to our even to our nearest dearest ones.
yeah,
And that's when we need to talk to a professional, where I have the freedom. I don't have to, carry the burden of, oh, I've got to be politically correct, emotionally correct. I can just let down my hair. And
yeah,
that is so much required. And
yeah.
I think the online platform may be not the best platform, but women and sexuality, the nuances of sexuality, or maybe this platform, we don't may have enough time for it. It's very complex. And in a society like India, it gets even further complicated. So with the the change that we're talking about with age and with menopause, there will be many things that will be crossing her path.
Yeah.
At that period, if the woman has to see her, let's say, her young daughter, kind of celebrating youth, or her son, that might have certain impact on her, and we will misjudge and misunderstand if we are pouncing on and trying to stamp it and say it's because of menopause and this is happening. Let us understand that there is a whole lot of range of things happening, and yes, she perhaps needs to talk about these complexities with somebody professional, so that she can in a way, unburden all the complexities of thoughts and emotions, feel
Yeah.
lighter, and come back and deal with the situation and feel that this is not me per se, and there is nothing wrong. This is how it is for almost all of us.
For everybody, yes, yes. To normalize it to an extent where she's feeling more empowered rather than, that there's something wrong with her.
Right, right.
Yeah. Okay. There was another question that says, was wondering why the present day youngsters take such drastic decisions as to commit suicide, even for silly, and she's put in brackets, in my opinion, reasons. So this is about suicide,
Yeah,
and yeah,
this is very troubling, because what she's saying is, I mean, we see that happening, and a whole lot of us may feel that, how could this young person, this young growing adult, kill himself or herself because of getting low marks in one particular subject? What is alarming, Sheila, is for me, is that how have we brought up that young adult, that
mm,
the young adult has not seen this to be a silly thing. This has become his or her life. And any disappointment on that is not giving him or her the strength to negotiate. And see, there are so many other um, aspects of life-giving force. And maybe this time has been a bad show. Next time I'll be able to negotiate better. And I don't give up on life, because there's so much else happening in my life, and this is not only, my life centers around this one identity. I think that is what is alarming, and what has happened to her, our growing up, that this is where it is leading us, this kind of disconnect, that you and I can see it is supposed to be silly, but the person's life where it is happening is not being able to see that. And why are we feeling it silly? Is because we can see that there's so much else in life, but have we been able to give that person that opportunity to cherish that so many aspects in life?
yeah, yeah.
And thereby what's happening is that the person is just holding on to
Focusing on one
with
thing.
absolutely with his entire might, and then when something is not in place, they just collapse, unfortunately.
Is it more to do with upbringing, or is peer pressure also playing a huge role? I imagine it would. But upbringing, I would think, does have a very, very strong role to play in the way people even perceive success, wouldn't you say? I mean, I wouldn't say it's all
Absolutely.
upbringing, but certainly, doesn't
I
it?
I would think it's all of most of it. It's upbringing, and upbringing also includes. I'm not just talking about parents. I'm talking about you and me. I'm talking about society, civil society. I'm talking about schools,
Yeah,
teachers,
yeah,
where our perspectives need to change. That we are kind of drilling a kind of constant competition into our young adults.
yeah,
It's like put them into rivalry position.
yeah. Just one
Would
minute.
you like to take time for that? Yeah.
Just keep talking.
Yeah. Sorry. So what I'm trying to say is that it's that, do we have to put them into a rivalry position? That I have to be better than this. The fact is that we can't be better all the time. Sometimes we'll be better than XYZ. Sometimes we'll be lesser than ABC. And
Yeah,
this is probably what we'll have to negotiate with life, because sometimes I'll have many rewards of life, and sometimes, unfortunately, I may not have those rewards, even if I deserve them.
And they, yeah, and that's okay, and that's life, you know.
And that's the tenacity, even if I deserve them.
Yeah,
Unfortunately, didn't happen.
yeah, yeah,
Later on, unfortunately, such tests of life would happen that, I deserve this great love of mine, and I'm perfect. And yes, you are. You're beautiful and perfect, but it still may not happen. He or she may, or the other person may want something else,
yeah,
and
yeah.
that may be heartbreaking. But we'll have to contain that because
Negotiate.
there are so many other um, lights of life.
Yeah. So there is a question about suicide. Is suicide an impulsive decision, or is it a plan? Is it planned and executed? If it's planned, how will one come to know that a person is going to commit suicide?
These are very difficult questions, and I often say that I don't know it all. I am trying to grope through my way. I think situations demand both these two considerations. Most of it can be impulsive, especially when we are looking at younger people.
Mm,
Um, as we read often that most crimes are passionate crimes, and
mm,
taking one's own life is a very engaging, intense action. So I would presume that it calls for a lot of investment of passion, and passion does not always talk about love. Passion is an intense engagement of emotion. There can be conflictual emotion, there can be ambivalent emotions. So and we take an action out of that because we are not being able to stabilize our emotional faculties, and that's when an an act of confusion may happen based on that unstable ground of conflict and ambivalence and intensity, and not being able to handle its potency. Um, Planned, perhaps, I mean, in my clinical work experience, I haven't yet come across very planned execution of suicide. Repeated talking about it, yes, that it has been in the mind, suicidal impulses, thoughts, but planning step-by-step action, I haven't as yet. But the little that I have read, not much, and the little imagination I would stretch is that perhaps it may be possible in very dire circumstances, very grave circumstances um, of,
Most of the time, you don't really know
yeah,
whether that the person, because I think a lot of the time, what happens with suicide is the families are just left in shock. You
yeah.
know, they maybe didn't expect it. I think what she means is that could one preempt it? Could one foresee that?
One can foresee it in terms of if we are sensitive towards each other's, engagement and connectedness, relational connectedness. I think we'll be able to see a person is disconnected, falling apart. We'll be able to feel it and help the person to stay connected. And also the person has to make an attempt,
Mm,
because otherwise mental health is a complex area where the person may be completely there may be a need that the person may completely give up and want to be taken care of, but it may not be it's truly going to be a situation where you can take the horse to the pond, but it'll be difficult to get the horse to drink water. So somewhere both have to hold hands together. Just to talk about when you said planned suicide, it's not the platform or the area to talk about it. Maybe then it'll be a different name that it'll take. There are planned suicides in terms of bombing issues and all of that, but I don't think that's the area we are
those are
getting
not.
into. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So in the same vein, the same person asks, Nalini says, how do you understand older people committing suicide at the age of 85 when they've nearly reached the end of their lives and they commit suicide? So, yeah, well, I think that's more a comment than.
it's It's sad. I mean, what's happening to the senior community within our society. Increasingly, we are getting into a very, very consumerist society where it's all on utility factor. It has always been there, but it is right on our face again that I think this is, I would say, a gross impact of the capitalist, consumerist way of living, where we almost have zilch connection with older people, their happiness, their being part of being the family. It's not easy, of course. I would say, in comparison to the Western, community, maybe in our country it is much more engaging. We do have
Yeah.
a much closer connection with older members of our family. But when such a culmination happens, it is not because the person has suddenly reached there. I think the culmination is a culmination. It has been happening at various stages, and the tenacity to hold it together, especially when I'm old, where I do not have my defenses, when my vulnerability is so obvious, so overt, uh, one is just at a very helpless situation. It's really, it's like giving up, and that's where we need to all the more stay strongly connected. And we see increasingly city life is having, solitary existence of individuals, adults, growing adults,
Older
young
adults.
people,
Yeah.
as well as young people, or the older community,
Yeah.
either
Yeah.
in couples or they've lost their partners and their children are somewhere else,
Yeah.
especially in the COVID situation, all the more.
Yeah. 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 Can you please share physical signs of depression? Vijay Makhija asks.
Right. I think it relates to what we talked a little earlier, is that once again, I would reiterate that when there is a certain withdrawal of anything which, I have enjoyed, at a physical level, at an emotional level, but I'm withdrawing from that. And a lot of the times, I don't feel like talking. I don't want to get up from the bed and get to work, even with the effort of getting dressed or something at a regular, daily mundane existence demands so much of effort, which means I'm wearing out. But I'm somebody who discourages to look at symptoms and say that I have,
Diagnosis.
yeah, because it's good to know about them. I definitely think so, but let us not jump to conclusion and pathologize the situation, because all of us, I mean, if you and I have to talk, if I'm sure I can definitely talk, there have been phases in my life where I didn't feel like doing a lot of
Yeah.
stuff, and I'm aware of that. I'm trying to work on it. Yes, depression is setting in. We need to work, we need to connect, we need to get out of that. So become aware of it, but the idea is not to know these symptoms and to say you have depression. A lot of the times I have patients who come and say that I have depression, and I encourage them to talk about it. What do you have? What happens to you? And
Mm.
then you see a lot of the times it's convenient to use the word depression. They start talking about is that, I can't handle this. I can't handle this. I'm nervous, or I'm angry, I'm agitated, I'm restless. So these are the nuances that we need to get at.
Yeah.
And that is much more, I would say, takes us to the crux of what's happening in the emotional journey, in the I would say the ego dynamics of the person, rather than look at physiological symptoms, which is there, it's important. But a lot of the times we pick up certain words which are convenient. I mean, it's easy to say I have depression, rather to say that I feel extremely jealous, or I feel very inferior with, I don't know, with my daughter, or I feel jealous of my wife or my partner. These are complex matters.
Yeah.
But so I would say encourage to talk about what's happening inside. Could be depression. The name could be fine, and let's see where it takes us.
Yeah. So Ravi Modali asks, are people in general maturing well in the psychosocial dimension of life?
I have a lot of faith and confidence in the younger generation, actually. I think, especially in the COVID situation, I've seen some of my very young students, the way they have stood up next to the community in terms of supporting the community, the way they have taken up risks, physical risk. Political risks, emotional turmoils, their capacity is huge, and they are far more, I would say, courageous than or we often turn out to be. So they are much more open to mental health awareness, changes, dilemmas, challenges, and I think we need to learn from them. I have a lot of confidence in the younger generation.
Confidence. Yeah. So there was a question from Dr. Paul Ramesh. What is the relationship of diet, brain inflammation, depression, and suicidal ideation? So yeah, that I'll take that.
Yeah,
And there is a very clear connection between depression and what you eat. There was a study that showed that those who eat a high fat diet and a diet high in processed foods and sugar have a higher incidence of depression. And the possible reason for that is the way our food affects the microbiome, which is the trillions of bacteria that live in our gut. And those trillions of bacteria seem to influence everything from our mood to our weight. And if we feed them this processed food high in sugar, it tends to change the colonies of bacteria and affect brain health. And so it is in our best interest to feed those bacteria well. And one of the ways to do that is to eat a plant centric diet where you consume your plate primarily needs to consist of uh, uh, plant foods, whole grains, vegetables, fruits, beans, seeds, and nuts, and keeping the certainly stay off sugar and certainly stay off the processed foods and keeping the oils to the absolute minimum. And the other thing that, of course, helps and which influences everything again from our mood to the bacteria to emotions, etc., is exercise. So these are the two things: diet and exercise definitely influence the way you think and your mood. So these are the practical ways to overcome minor mood disorders. There is another question here. It's by the same person. It says, is prolonged procrastination a manifestation of depression? Could be. It
Um,
could be.
could be, could be other complex emotional areas as well, but could be depression, definitely. Could
Yeah.
be, I think the way psychoanalysis sees depression also needs to be maybe shared a little bit. It is almost an internalization of aggression.
Mhm.
So instead of my
I was just going to ask you that actually, Juma, that a lot of people do express depression. I mean, they may be actually depressed, it may come out as anger. Have you
yeah,
come
yeah,
across that?
yeah. So there is anger. Now when it is expressed, it has its own repercussions. When it is externally expressed to X, Y, Z persons or situations, it has its own consequences, which are not definitely favorable. Similarly, when it is internalized, then it's also not favorable. So in between, we have to find a balance where it doesn't mean that we are not going to feel angry. We will have anger, we will have other conflicts, all of that. So how do we process that, and how do we, and I think that is the emotional enrichment that we are talking about, which women, because of their early exposure to so many changes and so many challenging familial situations that they have to negotiate with, that they have, as one would in today's parlance say, their EQ is far sharper.
Mm.
because they're having to negotiate with that. But the result being it's so much bombarded that it doesn't last too long. And then they're having to look for, how they can recuperate and get back into functionality. We see a lot of this, with men at a later stage. I mean, I keep saying that it does happen, maybe in our family structures in the Indian scenario, we find a lot of the times older, our mothers to be emotionally stronger than compared to our fathers at an older stage of life. And that's probably because of this. I may be mistaken, but this is my understanding.
Interpretation. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Um, so Somdatha Chatterjee says even years after a patient has died by suicide, there seems to exist a lot of hush hush around the act, and there are attempts to keep the entire episode under wraps by the family or the larger society. Can you shed some light on this?
Um, I think we see suicide as once again the epitome of uh, mental health pathology. So the family seems to be stamped to be pathologized, and that's why probably it's we keep it hushed, and also because we think not just the family is pathologized, it's because of the family members that this person has committed
Suicide,
suicide.
yeah.
So it's like we are all the accused ones.
Mm.
um, this is a complex area of uh, could be a reaction formation of survivor's guilt also. I mean, it changes from situation to situation, but I think in a short way to respond to Shumdatta, I know her very well, so I could identify. I think I would like to say this much, that this is what the family sees it. Suicide is the epitome of mental health pathology. As I would equate that to how families get to see women marrying out of their families, a lot of the times seen in our family, in our Indian society, as the honor killing. So it's
Mhm.
like you the entire family gets stigmatized. So you just erase that person. That person doesn't
Yes.
exist. And it's very interesting, while talking to you, I keep often wondering that family honor is, questioned when a woman marries outside of the family fraternity. But when there's a family member committing an act of crime, there is no family honor, there's no honor killing. Not that I'm proposing that, but our sense of honor is
Yeah.
very, very complex.
Twisted. Yes. Yes. Very much. Yes. Depression is a word that is commonly used. You go quiet, you're depressed. You're sad, you're depressed. I think that's just a comment. Is there any online test to do if a person is depressed? And are there different levels of depression?
I think
Vijay
there
Makija.
I think there will be many online tests for
Yes,
many of this.
yes. The DSM criteria must be there online. I'm sure they can just
Absolutely,
Google it. Yeah.
absolutely. But I think there would be other online tests also. But I think for clinical work, so far we have always talked about not really just going by the online test, but to actually do the tests with the psychologists themselves. But for clinical submission of reports and all of that. But I think once again the COVID situation may change situations where certain tests may not be free online, but if you are paying, maybe it can have such a valid standardized reading.
Yeah. Yeah. He says, Vijay Makhija, Dr. Namir, you emphasized a plant based diet. Your view on having a balanced diet with a good blend of plant based animal protein, say fish and eggs. Yes, it's a spectrum, Vijay. It's a spectrum of having too much of animal products, especially if they are processed. the less of the animal products that you eat, and the more of the more importantly, it's to emphasize the more of the plant proteins that you eat. Sorry, the plant products that you eat. That is what seems to benefit the microbiome. And this comes from this Blue Zone study where they looked at the countries which had the highest number of centenarians. So it's not so much about if one is not able to eliminate the animal products completely, that's perfectly understandable. It's about going somewhere along the spectrum where you consume more of plant products and less of especially the processed plant animal products. There's a comment. I agree. Society's sense of where honor lies is definitely skewed. Yes. Then there was another question about the mask in the pandemic. Using the mask continuously for more than 6 hours a day, talking to patients. So this was Dr. Sanjay. He says it feels like a low dose of continuous smothering. There is no dip in oxygen saturation. I feel it's a type of psychological derangement. I'm not sure if anyone has reported about this, but I'm sure there must be something that we are missing. I think it's also because we have to talk continuously with the mask on.
I
Yeah,
think I completely understand
I
that.
completely agree.
I
Completely
mean,
agree.
it's a physiological claustrophobic feeling as well as a mental claustrophobic feeling. And
Yeah,
I often feel, I mean, I think just to be able to step out of the house and stand under an open sky, it's so relieving. And you just take out a little bit and breathe fresh air and then you put it up again.
yes,
I think I completely understand what he's saying.
yes. Absolutely. And isn't it true also, Juma, that human beings really need to look at the face? I mean, we thrive on human connections, looking at the other person's face and, observing micro expressions, etc., which are mostly covered if you're using a mask. So that must be adding to some form of psychological stress, I would imagine, when you're not really able to, I mean, besides the fact that you don't recognize the person, that's,
Yes, that's the other part. But
yeah,
I think, every situation has its own challenges and things to offer. And if we can learn from this, maybe we have to work on our other senses a lot more, like blind people do,
yeah,
and really want to understand the person.
yeah,
Like half the time, one doesn't understand if the person is smiling or,
yes,
grim or sad, but maybe one really have to focus, especially for therapy. I must say, it gets very difficult because on one hand, you're not really looking deep into the eyes of of the person, but you're trying to feel the person. But this is
decide other emotions.
yeah, right. But this is also something that sometimes it makes your hearing difficult, your verbalization difficult.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
So I think I would like to see it in this way, that it's as a therapist, I it gives me to work a little on my other senses to try and understand. But I do agree with what he's
yeah,
saying, that
yeah.
it
It's a
is
very
very,
stressful
very,
situation.
very stressful.
Yeah, yeah. So Deepthi says, what makes one always think negative about a relation when things are smooth? I'm not sure if this is about depression.
Probably, I think from the question that Diti is saying, I'm wondering if she's talking about her apprehension when actually everything is going well, and she's apprehensive that, what if this doesn't go well? What if something? Um, I think I would say is that the what ifs, if they are troubling me so much, do a little reflection and see that maybe the what ifs have been with me for a while, but things have been more or less steady, and I've come here. That's one point. So it's going to be all right. Two, I would say, is that once again, to be able to accept that things may not be exactly this way, and I'm apprehensive because I'm loving what is most beautiful at the moment. I would say if I cherish this love, the moment that I'm enjoying and everything is fine, I'm really full of it. That itself will give me the strength if something is not going to work out later on. So have faith in the process, I would say. It may sound a little corny about have faith, but then what else to do but to create
Absolutely, absolutely.
processes?
Yeah, absolutely. And do you think vitamin D deficiency also mimics symptoms of depression? It vitamin D deficiency actually causes depression. It not just
Yeah,
mimics symptoms, it actually causes depression. So yes, if your vitamin D is low, you should definitely be supplemented. B12 is another vitamin that can cause
yeah.
depression. So you do need to look at those two vitamins at the least. Thyroid disorder, so a metabolic disorder also needs to be looked for when somebody is depressed. A hypothyroid person can also be depressed. So doing all the basic metabolic tests could be useful to rule out an organic cause.
Sheila, I think this is a wonderful juncture which is happening right now. We are, I think, first time talking about, I mean, not first time maybe, but for me, uh, a holistic sense of health. We are talking about mental health
Yeah.
and physiological health, and we are talking about how altogether both
Yes.
comprises what is good health.
Yes. The thing is also to bring into perspective here, Juma, is that a lot of times we look at the mind and body completely separately. Mental health is
Absolutely.
different and the physical health.
Right, right,
Not everything that happens to our body happens to the brain, and whatever happens to the brain happens to the body. So clearly there has to be holistic health. Although that word holistic is used and abused, it has to be it
right.
has to be holistic, right? So yeah, he says any micronutrients, omegas, probiotics that have a role in addressing depression. I've already mentioned vitamin D and B12 are extremely important. Omega 3, their benefits have really not been proven. Probiotics, yes, if they are natural, it's better. Eating the fermented vegetables like your kimchi and sauerkraut, that would be better. I don't know how good the commercially bought. I mean, I'm always suspicious of commercially bought probiotics, but I'm sure if there's a good brand, that would definitely help in improving your microbiome, which we are trying to keep happy. Yeah, you won't believe we're almost at an hour, Juman. I've
Ah,
still
yeah.
got several questions that have come up, but I think we do need to end now. This has been a really, I think, enriching, both, I'm sure by the comments, it's enriching for everybody. It's certainly been enriching for me.
For
Maybe we
me
should do
too.
another session, not
Sure.
specifically on depression. I think there are so many other
Right,
issues. I wanted to touch upon bipolar because I
right,
think that is an issue that, where people get confused about it. So bipolar and then of course other emotional disorders, I won't say disorders, emotional issues that
right, right.
your patients come to you with, and how to address them. So it's
Before
time
before
to.
before we wind up, do I have 1 minute to say something
Yes,
about you?
yes.
I don't know if the viewers are aware, but I would like to share with the viewers that when I first discovered Sheila in the mountains of Uti, I have been absolutely mesmerized seeing that different people at different places talking about, Dr. Sheila Nambiar. Oh, but my child was born. She got my daughter out, or she got my son out. So this is this amazing friend, doctor, my colleague, who takes out little babies with such care and gives them light to the world. And I think someday they should go and visit you in the mountains.
So yes, I'm waiting for you to come and visit
I
again.
will. I will.
Yes.
Okay.
So thank you so much, Juma. And as you
Sure.
can see, I mean, we can go on and on, but we can't. So we'll wind up here, and I'll definitely schedule another session with you. Just like everybody here is saying, very informative talk. Thank you. So thank you so much once again, and we'll catch up.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank
And
you.
thank you,
Thank you, Sheila.
everybody, for logging in. Please send in more questions if you like. I will get to Dr. Juma and then get back to you. Bye bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.